and welcome to Roundtable 4. My name is Maher Nasser. I'm the Director of the Outreach Division, and I'm the partner in organizing this conference from the Department of Public Information. When we speak about the education for global citizenship, achieving the SDGs together, one way that you can put it in your mind when you think about the SDGs, instead of trying to remember 17 and forget about the 169 goals, think about 5 Ps that were highlighted in the Secretary General's report before the SDGs, synthesis report. The 5 Ps that the SDGs and Global 2030 agenda is basically about people living in prosperity and peace, and basically partnership while protecting the planet. And this is what this roundtable is about. It's basically about energy, environment, and climate change, which are elements of the different sustainable development goals and how they interact and relate. And we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts that will be led by moderator Leonzo Barreno, Adjunct Professor of School of Journalism at the University of Regina. Roberto, I leave it to you, and good luck with the roundtable. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for attending this session. We are very thrilled to be in your country. Also to all the youth and delegates from all over the world, welcome to this Roundtable 4. Before I begin this panel, I just wanted to share a little bit of a story with you, so bear with me, please. This morning, very early, at about 6 in the morning, I woke up and I turned on the TV, and I was watching a local program, and it was about a elderly woman who was being helped by other people, and at the end of the show, she went to the top of a hill by herself. She must have been in her late 90s, and she went to the top of the hill with her best clothing, and she made it all the way, and at the end of her journey, she kneeled on top of the hill, and she offered a beverage and food to the hill. She had an altar on top of the hill. And then she prayed. And it really was sort of like a shock to me to see that here in Korea, that practice is so similar to what we practice as indigenous peoples in Latin America and probably other parts of the world. So for me, it was such a nice way to start the day. And after saying that, I also would like to thank the United Nations for inviting us to be here, your national leadership, but also I would like to, as an indigenous person, would like to recognize that there are other things that we don't necessarily think, but as indigenous peoples we have to do. So please bear with me. Just would like to, for a few seconds, thank the Creator for allowing us to come to your land. I also would like to thank the mountains of this land, the rivers of this land, the lakes, for allowing us to be here. For, as somebody said yesterday, is that they are not inanimate objects. For us as indigenous peoples, they are life, they are our relatives, and therefore that explains why indigenous peoples all over the world keep defending their lands. After saying that, it is an honor for me to share this table with such distinguished people, and we just were sharing a laugh with some of them because this is the United Nations. We have representatives from Asia, we have representatives from Europe, working for different organizations, of course, from Africa and North America, and in my case, from Latin America, although I live in Canada. But without further ado, I would like to start with our presentation today. And the first person to speak to you is Dr. Han Shi. Dr. Han Shi is a professor of public policy at the City University of Hong Kong. And he's going to speak to you about China's role on SDG and how China can accomplish that. He's also a distinguished professor, an accomplished academic. So, Dr. Shi, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I would first appreciate the invitation of the organizer of the conference for me to share some thoughts about China rather than, although I'm working in Hong Kong at a Hong Kong-based university, but my entire career, about 30 years, is related to China environment and sustainability policy. So I will basically touch upon 3 points. One is China's role in the implementation of SDG worldwide. Second is major challenge that China is facing to fulfill that role. The third is about the universities. What role university can play to facilitate this very important initiative. We all know China has played a very important role in implementation of MDG, poverty alleviation, the health situation, and the primary school enrollment. My argument is China can even play a greater role in implementing the SDG worldwide. The reason is below. First, China now is definitely still the most populous country and the second largest economy and the largest international trading nation, as well as a rising middle class population. So China's performance surely will actually has a great impact on the global implementation. That is quite obvious. Second is China as world factory, as well as with rising middle class population, which means China's production and consumption activity will have environment impacts well beyond its national border, right? Nowadays, even South Korea, quite often looking at how the smogs, from China actually affect the air quality here, let alone like how Chinese consumers, their decision in terms of seafood, like the forest products, will have great impacts on the ecosystem in other parts of China. But also, as a world factory, you may using a lot Samsung cell phone, but actually the production of that is quite largely actually taking place in China. So basically the performance of China's production system has a great impact on the sustainable consumption here in Korea and other parts of the world. Thirdly is China is a big country, also quite different. Every locality has very, very different socio-economic development status. Basically, China's implementation, a lot of these efforts in different parts of China, that means using our policy language, that is policy experiment in very, very different socio-economic context. Therefore, if that lessons or experience actually implementing SDG-related policy in different socio-economic contexts can be summarized, distilled, that lessons experience can not only benefit China, but also many other developing countries. And next is, China also play a very special role in the adoption and the commercialization of green technology. A lot of, maybe good technology, prototype can be developed in more developed countries. But because of the size of the markets, as well as the manufacturing capacity, China was more likely actually to adapt those type of technology in China. And China also has a very, very special role, which is can significantly reduce the manufacture cost of those technology products. China is, I would say, no other countries has this capacity to lower the manufacturing cost. So therefore, China can play a very, very important role, which adopt those green technology, which can be first developed in the Western countries. And also, it can adapt to very relatively harsh environment. for some of technology. That is very important when you try to widely diffuse those technology in other developing countries. You need that technology resilient, can adapt to very, very different, even harsh environment. The fifth is 15 years ago, when MDG was first implemented, China is still a net recipient of ODA. Nowadays, China offers support to close to 120 developing countries through South-South cooperation. So that situation has complete change. So it can play a very proactive role. The second is, although there's potential, but China also facing some major difficulty in realizing their role. I will regard the three major players in China, which are very important to implement SDG. One is Chinese cities. Second is Chinese business. Third one is middle-class consumers. I regard that is the three key players. So let's come in about what are major barriers. First is, frankly, not many Chinese know SDG, terms, terminologies, right? So every country will say, publicity is the first thing you will do. But there is a special barrier, the language barrier. And even looking at the main stuff related to SDG publicity are in English, right? Our media cannot directly adopt that. And because of language, because of our culture aspects, so we basically lack of sort of culturally relevant publicity material for us to do that in the first place. That is, the major barrier you have to overcome. For cities, wherever, central government say, if local governments will really adopt some SDG policy and goals, they have to see the synergy between the specific SDG goals with their own agenda. If they cannot align as some particular SDG with their own agenda and program, so SDG is something add-on, not sort of integrate. To that extent, it will not be actually seriously implemented by the local governments. Another aspect is when economies slow down, all the local governments in China now facing the not the growing, but even reduction in the local government revenue. So basically, they have more mandates to implement more social environment objectives, but in a context with declining financial resources. Only thing is, if they can find more synergy and reduce the conflicts, or better align those, then they can effect more effectively. I hope during the next 15 years, the situation may change, but in fact, basically, they have to prioritize certain targets and find a synergy. But that's not easy because they lack institutional capacity. Like China and many developing countries, the central government may be quite powerful, quite strong, but at local level, their institutional capacity is less. In terms of companies start to do environment. Madam Xu will talk about the Chinese company, actually. But the issue is they are still at early stage of actually implementing. They may say they pay attention to, right? China also lack a mandatory environment information disclosure regulation. So company is not a common practice to publish their environment information or sustainability report. It is an exception rather than norm. Consumers, middle-class consumers, very, very important. And they all, if you do a survey, many of them, it's a popular saying. They say, I protect the environment. But the issue is whether they are willing to pay more for those environment benefits. That's sort of key. In the long run, you have to be willing to pay more. Actually, this you will have fundamental. So those are the barriers. So I'm coming from a university, so I have to say something about what role university can help sort of, to realize their potential. China university, first of all, show the responsibility to generate next generation societal leaders. But whether they have commitment or values of sustainable development, that's a big question mark. right? We have some like disciplines, but we don't see the business school, their curriculum become, has transformed from more traditional shareholder value-centric curricula to more stakeholder sort of values. And the law school, engineer school, I think they lag behind it. How sustainability can transform the generic curriculum rather than very specific environment like discipline in university. This is both a challenge and opportunity. Second is different stakeholders have different goal and agenda. University can play an honest broker to bring in different parties to start a dialogue on that. I even joke, Chinese university can play a more constructive role to bring China's participants with international participants, right? They are more neutral. They sit there as a moderator. Third one is, as I say, China can play a policy experimentation role, but the issue is who are going to distill their lessons and experience from those policy experiments. Government agencies not adequate to do that. So university really should be able to play a very, very important role. Meanwhile, like most developing countries, we have relatively weak practice in those independent policy evaluation. It's not a common practice like more European Commission or OECD countries. You do more independent policy evaluation to looking at the government programs or policy, how effective they're implemented. You find weakness and you improve on that, right? University in these aspects can actually, at least at this early stage, can play a very, very important role. There's huge needs for university to help local governments to enhance their capacity, institutional capacity. I mentioned all of that. How to prioritize, how to align them, and also help the company as well to integrate sustainability into their corporate strategy. The lacking of the last point. The last point is the publicity material production, as mentioned. We lack of cultural relevance, so university can play. And it's not media, work with media to play those. And China University can also, very, very important to help train the overseas students from African countries, from many other countries. I see more and more. So if they integrate the sustainability, it helps a lot. So I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shi, for such an eloquent presentation. There is no question the role that China plays in the world. And it's really important that you tell us about how difficult it is to communicate the whole SDG concept. For many of us, it was a foreign concept. And now, when we go to different communities and teach that what the United Nations wants to achieve, it's like convincing, it's really hard. But I would like Ms. Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim to basically explain more about it, because coming from Chad, as the coordinator of the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad, she has had personal experience about the indigenous worldview and then explaining this whole concept of the SDG. So, Ms. Oumarou, please.
Thank you very much, dear moderators, and thank you for the prayer starting really as indigenous people. I really appreciate that, because the mountain, all the environment issues, this is us, and this is how we really need to keep it. Thank you for the organizer to giving me this second chance to speak in this panel and exchange my little experience with you. Yes, I would like to start by indigenous peoples keeps more than 80% of the biodiversity around the world. Then most of these peoples are at the rural areas, forests, mountain, savannas, as I'm coming from the pastoral communities. And it's important for us to keep this environment because we are depending on it. It's giving us food. I used to say that the brooch are our supermarket. It's giving us food, medicine, water. And imagine for the developed countries when the supermarket is closed for one day or increasing money and people's going to ask the governments. So for us, seeing these environment issues destroying is really seeing our life, but we do not have someone to complain to change the laws. So the impact of the climate change is directly into the environment, but into the peoples who are living with it also. If I can take the example of the Chad where I'm coming from my indigenous peoples who are the nomadic, we do have the desertification who are advancing very quickly, and we have the season changing. From the season change, we used to have 3 seasons: rain season, cold season, and dry season. But now it's just 2 seasons. And the rain is not coming normally. It's come 2 weeks heavy rain, then we have floods, or it can come like 1-2 weeks without any rain. It's really dry. And imagine how people can cope with this one. So then those people, how are you going to talk them about the SDGs? They do not used to know this. But they are living with this impact of the climate change, impact of the poverty, and all the lack of education and health from their daily life. So this is really everyday people are living with it, but without knowing, as the doctor just said here, the term is SDGs, or it's climate change, or the need adaptation or mitigations. But what they are doing, we are using our indigenous traditional knowledges, and this is mean from our observation from the trees, from the birds, from the sky, and to see how people can adapt them daily life. I can give you the example. We use our meteorological information. We do not have radio or TVs or internet to give us the meteorological information. If it's going to rain or if it's going to be sunny, we have to use the sunglasses. No. For us, we are using the trees to predict, for example, if next year will be a good year, and good year, it means like a good rain. So we see certain kind of trees, and we cut the fruit, and we see the liquid inside. If it's abundant, we know that the next year will be good. So that's how we are using our indigenous traditional knowledge to get really adapt from all those issues. And we use it also for our daily life to combat this, poverty, and to get also medicine from this one. Then now with all the emerging issues as technologies and others, how we do that, we try to marry the traditional knowledge and the science knowledge to get a better resilience for the communities. And this one, we use it through the 3D mapping participatory, and that from the geographical informations, and we put it with the indigenous knowledge, we put it in the map, and we see how peoples are living, how they can keep the forest, how they can keep the waters, and how they can use sustainably the natural resources, and that give them way to decide. But as global citizens, we say, where is the place of these peoples to take the decision for the better life, to implement the SDGs, and to see how the future will be better? We need to give them more place. So we know that now in the Paris Agreement adoption, in the Article 7 especially, there is recognition of indigenous traditional knowledge, but we need implementation of this agreement. And this one needs to be not only at the international level, but at the local level with the peoples. And peoples need to be in the heart of what is going on. And that's why in all the national determination engagement of the countries, they need to include the participation of all the peoples, especially the women, especially the indigenous peoples. And we know how they are most impacted and how they are really giving the solutions. And that will be the part of the global citizen participation for the better life and also for the implementation of the SDGs. That where we want to see our place and our role is taken into account. And we know that when we talk about development, energy is really the most important, and energy is not for us like light. Energy is survival. Energy can make agriculture better. Energy can make water. Energy can make construction, buildings, and all the issues. So how this energy can be transferred to the clean energy for the better life? And that's what we need as indigenous peoples to get small-scale project at the people level, but not the big infrastructure who can, again, take the land grabbing and make just the better life of the people who do have already them life better. So that's why it's very important to be, as global citizen, to be take into account and to be listening for the first time, hear from the needs of the peoples and change them life. This is very important when we talked about this, to shift on the financial issues. How the finance can be diverse, can reach the ground. When we talk about all the environmental issues, it's 20 years since Rio discussed about this one. But when we see, we are going worse to worse. How much money went directly to the communities who are needing and who have the solutions? So that's why we want to have the change of the system, and the strategy needs to be changed and give the peoples better life, especially our indigenous peoples. They have the solution. They wish to help, and we need to save our identity. And that's why we need the help of everyone, and we need our role to be play fully as global citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hindou. It is so many wise words on what you said. From a brother from a different continent, I can tell you that the same problems that you face in Chad is the same that we face in many Latin American communities. And I would like everybody to think about that most of our people live in rural areas. And perhaps in the cities, we don't see much of the impact that global warming is having, but when you go to communities in Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia, you will see that. And so therefore, we are really playing with our own lives. So thank you so much, Ms. Ibrahim, for saying what you shared with us. And that's why it's so important, the role of governments, the role of policymakers. And I think that that's the point of view that your former Minister of the Environment is going to bring to us. Madame Myungja Kim, who is the President-elect of the Korea Foundation of Science and Technology Societies, will give us the perspective of Korea, because I came to your land for the first time, and I admire what you guys have achieved. And so, Madame Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was informed that I can speak about 10 minutes, so I was thinking about to speak about the concept of the sustainable development, concept of the paradigm of sustainable development, and secondly, the ideological aspect of environmentalism. But due to time constraint, I'll just talk about the environmentalism, the background of the social environmental movement. I wrote a book titled The Oriental and Occidental Traditions in Science and Technology and the Rise of Environmentalism in 1991. So with that background, I'll talk about how to realize the SDGs on a global scale. We must indeed develop specific and practicable action plans, yet it seems worth emphasizing that the 17 SDGs do not each address a separate issue. And the issues they address are, in fact, interconnected and interdependent. The solutions, therefore, must also be thought through an interdisciplinary and integrated approach with dialogues maintained among different fields and interest groups. And since treating the symptoms after they peer are often costly and in many cases too late. Prevention should be the overriding policy premise. Above all, there should be a broadly shared recognition that continuing with the wasteful and largely unrecycled use of the resources on a massive scale, which is what we have been doing, could result in the destruction and deterioration of much of the Earth ecosystem. Since what we really need is thus a change in consciousness that can facilitate policy efforts toward eliciting greater cooperation from various economic sector interests, the change of value should accompany the attempts to transform socio-economic systems and new scientific and technological breakthroughs. The efforts toward making sustainable development a reality can be truly effective when our civilization can go beyond a materialistic culture dominated by priorities characteristic of industrial society and embrace a new set of values through an integrative and structural educational approach derived from multi-party dialogues. It is only when we thus embrace a new set of values through a deep soul searching as to what purpose our present cutting-edge technological civilization serves, how we can live a life that is authentically human, and what the proper relationship between nature and humans should be. It is only then that a fundamental approach to our urgent problem may become possible. With regard to the ideological aspect of environmentalism, the 1960s were a time when social environmental movement came back to life in Western society. There came to be a great deal of interest in exploring the relationship between the origins of ecological crisis and various philosophies of nature, in particular, the attempt to trace its origins to the anthropocentric perspective, emphasizing humanity's conquest of nature, came to command much attention. As a solution to the ecological crisis, some in turn proposed embracing non-Western philosophies, emphasizing harmony between nature and humans, as well as modern reinterpretations of more eco-friendly Western traditions of philosophy and even mysticism. As a prime example, historian of science Lin White Jr. suggested in the mid-1960s that Zen, which derives from both Taoism of China and Buddhism of India, might provide an answer to the ecological crisis in progress. To the Taoist emphasis on a life lived as a harmonious flow, which is in keeping with nature's principles, and the Buddhist emphasis on escaping from the karmic wheel of greed and attachment to reach the state of nirvana, Zen added an aesthetic appreciation of nature, thus providing what seemed to be an ideal model for eco-friendly philosophies much needed in the era of materialism and commercialism. Time is over, so maybe I should stop here and then...
Sure, I'm sure that later on we
if
can.
I can be given some time, I will.
Would you like to take one more minute? Go ahead.
Can I take a few?
One couple more minutes? Sure.
I just arrived from Seoul, so I didn't know about the time limit. In a similar vein, some began to seek solutions to modern ecological crises in ancient animistic beliefs and other types of traditional value systems. A number of aphorisms became popular in the process. Most notable examples included man and animal are relatives of the ancient Greek Pythagoreans, nothing in excess from the Temple of Delphi, give me neither riches nor poverty from Judaism, too far is as bad as not enough from Confucianism, he knows peace, who has forgotten desire from Hinduism. Such teachings help people realize that the fundamental cause of our ecological crisis is a materialistic society that runs under the slogan, more and bigger is better, and which depends on mass production, mass consumption, and mass waste disposal. It was such a realization which has led some to emphasize responsible consumption and production and sustainable cities and communities as concrete action plans toward making sustainable development a reality. A proper recognition of human limitations within this vast universe also provided clues for change. As Homo faber and Homo sapiens, humans are distinct from other organisms. Yet, by themselves, humans do not constitute a proper unit of life. Humans cannot exist apart from a holistic system that embraces other life forms, including those that inhabit the vast ocean. Therefore, to arrive at a sustainable system of values, we should begin by becoming reacquainted with traditional indigenous belief systems and practices that are based on a more profound understanding than we have today of the relationship between humans and the ecosystem. On the other hand, I'd like to point out that despite the limitations, humans may well have been endowed with the ability to protect life as it exists in our world. It may all depend on whether we have the will and whether we get around to making the decision. If we would but acknowledge that, faced with environmental disasters like climate change, we no longer have the luxury of delaying decision. The choice we have to make will seem obvious. If we, as members of the Earth ecosystem, are to participate as a change toward sustainable development, we need to explore and reinterpret values and ecological knowledge traditions that defy the limitations of time and space, and formulate a new worldview that can help us overcome the current ecological crisis. We need a new system of values as global citizens and as stewards of the planet Earth. In this sense, I believe meetings like this today are in every way meaningful. Thank you for my time.
Actually, I am very happy to give you the extra minutes for what you said in the last 3 minutes, for including indigenous knowledge, because indigenous knowledge had been always in the background, never really taken into consideration. But now that we are coming as educators, as youth, speaking for ourselves, telling the world that we don't have the whole truth, we don't have all the solutions, but we have certainly overcome very serious difficulties, and we know how to survive. So thank you, Madam, for sharing that with us. Our next speaker actually will bring us his perspectives about what UNESCO is doing precisely on educating the world about different perspectives. So it is my honor to introduce to you to Mr. Alexander Leicht, who is the chief of UNESCO, section of education for sustainable development and global citizenship. So, Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Leonzo. Thank you very much for inviting us here. I'm very pleased to share just a few points from the UNESCO perspective. As you know, the UN organization that is leading work on global citizenship education and education for sustainable development. And I'll focus very briefly on the kind of education that you need to promote environmental sustainability specifically. I'll start with a very, very simple premise. In fact, I'm sure we can easily all agree that environmental challenges are a forceful argument for global citizenship. I think there are very few global challenges that are so obviously connected to the whole world and so obviously affect everyone, like, for example, climate change. What I do in an industrialized country immediately affects what happens, for example, in a small island development state. And of course, we need to work together across the world to address climate change, environmental challenges, and working together across the world is the only way to do that. Secondly, environmental challenges are also a very good argument for boosting the role of education globally. Because of course we need political agreements to address environmental challenges, we need fiscal incentives, we need technological solutions, but what we in the end need is a global change of mindsets and actions, and only education can bring that about. We're very happy, of course, to see a specific place for this kind of education in the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically in the 3 targets that you see listed here on the slides. And it's very important to emphasize that it's not any kind of education that promotes environmental sustainability. In fact, as you all know, a simple increase in education, in educational levels or in educational achievement can lead to more environmental awareness, but it also can lead to much more unsustainable consumption levels. So it's not any kind of education. It's a very specific education. Many of you will know that there's a very sophisticated discourse out there on what kind of competencies you need to promote sustainable development and specifically environmental sustainability. You can put it in academic terms, or you can put it in very simple terms. In a nutshell, this really means that learners are able to make connections. Learners are able to imagine the future, think about how do my actions affect people 50 years or 100 years down the line. It means learners are able to do the right thing, make the right kind of choices for environmental sustainability. They know how to get there, and they know how to work together. These 5 key competencies are really at the essence of an education that promotes sustainable development and global citizenship. And to spell this out a little bit further with regard to specifically the challenge of climate change, you can think of the following learning objectives. For example, it means for a learner to understand the scientific facts of climate change, to understand the economic processes that bring climate change about. So here you have the cognitive knowledge that everyone should have when it comes to climate change, or some of the cognitive knowledge. Then you have a social-emotional dimension. You need to experience a sense of connection with those that are affected by climate change, maybe by my actions that bring climate change about. You need to experience a sense of empowerment, that what I do about climate change matters. And then finally, you need an action competence. You need to be able to act. You need to move beyond really the safe space of education, and you need to interact with the real world and become active in the real world. You need to act to participate in societal and political processes that address climate change, or you need to act to take small and big steps in the local environment to mitigate climate change. It's of course, as I hope will become evident from these very, very few and short points, it's not a traditional style, a teacher knows it all education that can bring this kind of knowledge and these kinds of competencies about. It's an education that is innovative, is learner-centered, and that really is very action-oriented and exploratory, so very different from how education is still practiced very often today. As UNESCO, we're trying to promote this work. As I mentioned, we are leading the global dialogue on education for sustainable development and global citizenship education. You can find on our website a number of materials, and you will soon find a publication that we are currently preparing that spells out learning objectives that every learner across the world should have for each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And this is our little contribution, and you will find it here on these websites. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexander. I will ask a couple of questions to you later, but before I introduce to the next two speakers, I would like you guys to start thinking about some questions that you have for all our guests, and after they finish, then I would like you to ask them questions so that you can also leave this room with something and leave us with something, because we are always learning as well. The fact that I have been teaching in different universities for 20 years, it doesn't make me know it all. So especially young people, please feel free to ask your questions later on. So my next speaker is a person very dynamic who inspires people. I'm very proud that she's Indigenous from First Nations in Canada. Ms. Takaya Blaney, she is a human rights activist from her First Nations, the Amin First Nations in Vancouver, Canada, but she is also a part of the Native Children Survival. So it is an honor to introduce to you to Takaya.
This might be a bit over under 5 minutes, but I'll give it a shot. Hello, my name is Takaya Blaney. I'm a Sliman Nation Native American. My ancestral name given to me by my kukpa, my grandfather, is Jagajimuh. Jagajimuh was a speaker, a revolutionary, and a defender for the rights of our people. Today I stand before you doing my best to give that name justice. I'm an environmentalist and advocate for Indigenous rights because I believe Indigenous people play a crucial role in the climate change dialogue, arrived resolutions, and movements taking place. This is considering that most areas of corporate interest exist on Indigenous territory, which is why it is crucial our Indigenous communities receive the resources and education to mobilize as global citizens combating climate change and poverty in our nations. Today, I will talk about how we can not just invite the ideas and presence of minority, frontline, and Indigenous communities to our table, but come back down to earth and have a conversation on a common ground about moving forward together with the principles and solutions that come from marginalized communities finally getting heard. As an Indigenous person, I'll start on the scale of Indigenous communities participating in this movement. How can we manage to transfuse and incorporate foundational principles of Indigenous ideology that prioritize environmental protection as a part of our sacred knowledge systems into how we approach conservation, sustainable development, and other mechanisms of overcoming climate crisis on a local scale? I emphasize on a local scale because this type of engagement is crucial. If we fail in the effort to include the voices of ordinary citizens, we fail to inspire the excitement and effort of the people that is crucial in making the program sustainable. So, as I said, we include local knowledge, in this case, Indigenous principles, meanwhile ensuring this exciting exchange, establishing cross-cultural partnerships and sustainable development methods, kickstarted with the assistance of NGOs and modeled after Indigenous cultural ideology, is executed in a manner that inspires trust and empowerment for Indigenous communities. So this knowledge is shared and implemented on the terms stated by the Indigenous community, not exploited and commercialized into a product no longer connected to Indigenous empowerment that deteriorates the sanctity of ancestral traditions for NGOs to use. For this is another iteration and cycle of colonial taking and appropriation, where parts of our identity are stolen and sold back to us. An example of this would be taking land use, or taking the land to use for conservation purposes, and then restricting Indigenous rights to access cultural resources. Or taking sensitive and sacred information on Indigenous medicine and sharing it without consent, or even selling it without circulating the funds back to the original community. As I said, most areas of corporate interest exist on Indigenous land. As valuable climate justice advocates, Indigenous people have the incredible platform of cultural information and mentalities that exist on this way of living and thinking that has been previously condemned by the narrow parameters of Western thinking. These Indigenous ways have given birth to so many important information on, for example, like alternative ways of medicine or conservation models tailored for local implementation, or making sure that our youth are given a way of connecting to our environment and understanding the gravity of being an environmental steward. So for Indigenous communities, the trajectory of changing our situation and trailblazing a narrative of cultural rediscovery and sustainable development for our future is met with a brick wall of confronting and reconciling with the past and our pain. Confronting and reconciling with generations of colonial violence. We need to make sure that we can be heard before we can heal, and know that we have the responsibility to hear and tell the story of our elders, the story of how they have been the direct target of racial violence, the story of how they are strong and stand upon the shoulders of giants, our traditions stacked thousands of years high, proud Indigenous wisdom that gives us hope and a sense of self, even when everything we know is taken from underneath us. It is important to share and preserve and develop in the way of culture so we may heal and move forward with solutions that align with the paradigm of our people, not just solutions imposed on us from NGOs, because that is a truly inspiring process. To not just impose a solution in an impoverished community, but to restore the rights of that community and donate resources/information to those people so they can feel secure and nourished once again and become active stewards for the future of Mother Earth. That's a truly inspiring process. That right there is having faith in the small communities of this globe. And once we ignite that vehicle of revolution in the Indigenous context, as Indigenous people, we can hold and share many answers to reach out a hand for our global community. Once Indigenous people have asserted sovereignty and jurisdiction over the developmental future of our nation, we can create culturally appropriate constitutions to govern the future of our nation by administering sacred Indigenous principles and the principles of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And we can include that into how we commence sustainable development projects and be in partnership with NGOs encouraging this growth. Well, once that happens, we're talking about grassroots action in its truest form. That's how we make conservation a sustainable program in small communities. That's how we make it a resonant concept, the truth of the people. We can't just approach this situation with the agency of just environmental protection. We need to understand that human rights and Mother Earth's rights are the same thing. This is immeasurably true for Indigenous peoples, and as we reconnect the youth of today and tomorrow with our environment again, this should become true for the rest of humankind. So how do we deconstruct the concrete wall of a paradigm that doesn't work anymore in our society? We stop thinking about deconstructing that paradigm with the terms of thinking from that paradigm. We change the way of thinking by changing the story and allowing the knowledge and history of more and more peoples to fit in the picture, to walk among us in the movement. Indigenous peoples, marginalized ethnic communities, people who have been ignored and left behind. The forgotten strength of these people is powerful beyond belief, and if we are inclusive and give them the tools to make their mark, their stories will change the way of our thinking, and our way of thinking will change our way of acting, and our way of acting will change the world. Thank you.
There are more than 5,000 indigenous groups around the world, more than 370 million of us. And so we are in a process of decolonizing our educational systems by precisely doing what Kaya just said. We are changing the way in which we were made to think by approaching the land and approaching our elders, approaching our ancestors. Because what we have been taught so far hasn't worked. And it has done a tremendous damage to our psyche, to our life, and more than anything to the land. And that's why we are defending that land and creating new ideas on how to keep the planet going. And you are all included in it, so you are welcome to come into our boat. The next speaker is Madame Tsui Ling. She is the chairperson of the board of the Donglee Environment Co Limited. She's going to speak from a corporate point of view. She's a female private entrepreneur in China. And I had to thank Dr. Han Shi because he so kindly offered to translate for her, because she's going to speak in Chinese and he's going to translate for all of us in English. So please use your earphones so that we can understand. Or if Dr. Shi is going to translate, so I think we will have no more problems. But I want to apologize to Madame Tsui for not having interpretation in Chinese. So thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. I come from Guangzhou. Because my English is good, not good, so now I need to speak Chinese. I hope Mr. Xu help me for translator. Yeah. 我是来自于广州的。广州呢是一个非常喜欢财富的地方。我们经常见面，我们会说恭喜发财。那么现在呢，广州呢也开始流行一种新的财富，叫绿色财富。那么我本人呢也是来自于中国阿拉善组织，这是一个中国最大的NGO 组织。那么本人我也是一个做生态环保公司的决策人。那么我们的公司呢，就是帮政府、帮中国做清洁的空气、清洁的水的技术和服务的。
I come from Guangzhou City in South China, where people most likely greet each other with the popular saying, 恭喜发财, may you be fortunate and prosperous. Nowadays, a new trend is emerging. They're called the green fortune, or simply the green is gold. I'm also a member of an environment NGO named the Society for Entrepreneur and Ecology. That is the largest and most influential entrepreneur-based environment NGO in China, comprised of more than 500 entrepreneurs. My most important job, of course, is serve as the chairperson of Ecological Landscaping and Restoration Company.
未来5年呢，中国呢会投入2万亿美元做生态环境的修复。中国已经不单是一个专门做这个城市的GDP， 同时还在兼顾一个城市的环境保护。这也是联合国 SDG 计划在中国的体现。很多的企业也纷纷的加入到这个环保行业，也包括我们的公司。
China pledged to invest $2 trillion in the ecological restoration and pollution control during the next 5 years. This signifies that China has no longer continued to pursue GDP in a single-headed manner, but also attach importance to environment protection. This very much aligns with the global SDGs, more and more Chinese companies start to enter the environment protection business. For example, my own company used to be in the traditional gardening and landscaping business, now more focused on the ecological restoration.
为了让城市变成森林，我们在城市立体绿化这方面做了非常大量的研究，可以把这个建筑的绿化率提高2倍以上，为城市提供了大量的绿色空间。那么对城市的热岛效应起到非常好的这个作用。那么我本人也在2015年意大利这个米兰世博会上被世界绿色组织授予国际贡献奖。
In order to change city into forests, we have conducted intensive R&D work in urban vertical greening. Our own technology of green roof and vertical greening can raise the green coverage rate of buildings by 200%, which effectively mitigate the urban heat island effect and help improve urban air quality. This innovation led me to win the annual Green Design International Contribution Award by the World Green Design Organization at the Milan Expo in 2015.
那么现在中国的这个空气的确是不太好，有的城市灰霾天气会达到1半的时间。那么我们这些年国家也在做一些生态环境治理，但是由于缺乏可持续的理念，有些地方做的不尽人意。OK， 就拿我们所居住的广州来说，广州在2010年亚运会期间投入了近30个亿来建设整个城市的这个水治理，但是呢，最后出现是工程做好了，但是水不能相通。这个整个的就是老百姓看到的效果就是绿化好了，但是水还是臭的。
At present, environment pollution in China is very serious. Like in 2013, Beijing almost suffered the smog pollution almost half of a year. We have launched large-scale environment protection projects, but because of lack of integrated approach to sustainable development, some environment pollution control projects are only treated as short-term one-off profit-making business, which led to inefficient outcome. Take my own city, Guangzhou, as an example. We have invested almost $3 billion to clean up the water system in the run-up to 2010 Asian Games. Although the projects are finished, but because of approach is not that correct, the water system has not been connected well. So in the end, we have not accomplished the kind of water quality we expect, although the green space have been increased.
中国人对联合国可持续发展的标准是非常陌生的，但是世界的环境保护离不开中国人，所以像我们这样子的环保企业要勇于担当，勇于做这种可持续发展的宣传。那么下个月我们将在广州举办一个蓝天行动，我希望把这一次的庆州宣言结合到我们的活动中来，在广州，在中国推广我们的环保意识，让普通老百姓也能够参与到我们的活动当中，那么让我们的天空越来越蓝。
To be frank, most Chinese do not know sustainable development goals, but the world must have China on board to effectively implement those goals. Therefore, we in environment business show the great responsibility of publicizing the concepts, raising the public awareness on these issues. We will organize a charity event called Blue Sky Action next month in Guangzhou. I hope I can disseminate some core message contained in the Guangzhou Declaration, which were adopted in this event through our own events and other activities. I will dedicate myself to raising environment awareness, engaging the public in the protection of a global environment in Guangzhou and China.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Tsui Ling. When you said green is gold, I had the wrong idea. I thought, where is she going with this? but after your presentation, it really gave us hope that China can recover itself from the pollution it is experiencing. I wish you all the best in your business. I think it is a model that we all can learn, that not everything is about destroying, that not everything is just taking the land from others. I think the ideas that you are promoting by turning cities into forests, I think it's a great idea. And hopefully the Chinese government and other governments can support your idea on these initiatives. So thank you very much for that. Before opening the floor for all of your questions, I just wanted to ask Alexander concretely what the UNESCO is doing in promoting education. I know that working with indigenous peoples is not your area, but maybe you work with people who are working in that area at UNESCO. The reason why I'm asking you about this is because a couple of weeks ago in Nicaragua, one of your colleagues in Latin America expressed that UNESCO Latin America was going to bring the issue of indigenous higher education to a regional meeting. And so for us as educators in higher education, it was such great news. And I was wondering if you know if UNESCO is doing the same thing in other parts of the world.
Okay, thank you very much. When you ask me what UNESCO is doing for education, that's of course too big a question for a quick answer, because a large part of our work is really promoting education, in particular the kind of education that I tried to briefly present here. But more specifically with regard to the role of indigenous peoples, I think in the sustainable development discourse, at least since Rio '92, participation has been one of the key values and one of the key practices. So when we promote sustainable development through education, then it almost goes without saying that the participation of every member of the community is crucial, including and in particular indigenous communities. And it's very sad to see that for a long time that has not been realized. But I think we're making a lot of progress in organizing consultations where really every voice is heard. In UNESCO, we have a specific unit, a specific team that is dealing with indigenous knowledge systems, and that is running a considerable amount of projects in order to make sure that education is compatible with and responsive to the demands and the needs of indigenous communities, specifically with regard to education to address climate change. Whenever we develop guidance materials, teaching materials, and specifically guidance for policymakers, that's one of the key recommendations that we include together with indigenous peoples, that the voices of every stakeholder in the community must be heard.
Thank you, Alexander. Now the floor is yours, and while you guys start making your way to the microphones, there are three microphones, so you can start going there. I want to ask one question to Dr. Han Shi, because you talk about the role of universities in helping the population of China to understand the SDGs. But now we have a new perspective, which is the perspective for Madame Tsui Ling, which is youth and businesses. So you see the universities cooperating with corporations, such as the one that Madame Tsui Ling leads. Do you see business and universities working together? This is a question for Dr. Han Shi.
Yeah, it's for China and most developing countries, when company now actually at early stage adopting environment measures, I see there is a significant lack of capacity within the corporate world, right? So first of all, university is important, like through business school, you need generate more the business leaders with their green hearts. Otherwise, in next 30, 50 years, we're still facing, traditional business leaders. But also, universities have a role to reach out. Now, they are playing more role because they have to assist the corporate, actually to do it more effectively. That is something I always say. I'll ask Tsui Ling whether from company view, how do they say university?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to open the floor for your questions, and please be as brief and specific as possible, and say your name and also the name of the person you're asking. Thank you.
Hi, let me do first. Oh, okay, sorry.
To the right first, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Marcos Montoiro. I'm working with the UN Convention to combat desertification. And this is a question for UNESCO. We have been collaborating with you to have a teacher's kit and some education material on desertification, land degradation, climate change. But one of the issues or the problems that we faced was how to include this in the regular curriculum. We know that governments and ministries of education are very jealous on what is taught during the schools. So in this case, we have to go through the UNESCO associate schools. Is there any way we could have the governments to include this kind of environmental education, and of course with the Sustainable Development Goals, enforced and included in their regular curricula? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question in the middle, and then the third question will be to the lady there. So go ahead, please.
Okay, it's my great honor to stand here and raise my question. Actually, it's also my pleasure for me to hear Chinese in the roundtable, and I'm a Chinese junior student in Beijing. Now my question is, there are several NGO and social entrepreneurs whose themes are SDGs in China, but they are not as famous as Alashan. Their managing situations are not that good. So my question is, how can they survive? Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Effie Chen. I'm from Association of World Citizens. I'm so happy to hear most of the speakers today agree that environmental protection really rely on people's heart and mentality, which is very, very important. So, and then conscience is so important for education. So my question is, how can, or as NGO levels, how can we apply conscience to the education and then educate our children from a very young age to be a global citizen? Thank you.
Okay. Alexander, would you mind to respond to the first question, please?
Okay, thank you very, very much. The question on how can we bring governments to have their schools teach about desertification, how to address desertification. Two parts of the answer. The first one is there is indeed already a certain level of political commitment on the side of governments, because when you review the relevant governmental commitments to education for sustainable development, you will find references to integrating the principles of the three Rio Conventions, including desertification, into education. So there is already a certain, as I said, level of political commitment and the possibility for NGOs and civil society to remind their governments that this is already at a certain level agreed upon. However, of course, I need to say that as you very well know, UNESCO's power, the UN's power, UNESCO's power in this area of work is mostly soft power. So the other thing, and that's the second part of the answer, that we can do, and to a certain extent we are already doing, is to mobilize our networks, such as the associated schools and UNESCO university chairs, for example, UNESCO national commissions across the world, to integrate education for sustainable development. And most of our relevant recommendations and teaching materials also make reference to the issue of desertification. So there is a certain kind of basis for the work, but I would certainly agree with you that it needs to be much expanded. Thanks.
Thanks, Alexander. Dr. Xi or Madame Tsui Ling, would you mind to respond to that question? Because it was specific about China.
刚才大家提到中国的 NGO 组织的确是非常弱的，就除了阿拉善组织，阿拉善组织里面有500多个企业家，像我一样的企业家在里面，所以呢，相对来讲实力会比较强。但是我认为这个目前在中国这个环保的这个意识非常的弱，就是公民意识非常弱，需要从一些企业家开始来带动这个整个的这个社会。 我认为一个企业家他必须是一个绿色环保的 CEO， 由他来带动支持，会影响到一大片的这个群体。我本人也是一样，在公司提倡绿色环保、低碳行动，那么带动公司尽量少用一次性的杯子、一次性的筷子等等，这些非常好的效果。我认为这个只是一个过程，将来这个 NGO 组织在中国也会慢慢的强大起来。谢谢。
I'll translate. The NGO sector in general is underdeveloped. As you mentioned, the SEE is a different NGO because it is made of more than 500 more powerful CEOs and entrepreneurs. So that is very important for the business leaders now play an important role. Like take me as an example. I advocate more low carbon life and environment behavior within my company. So that's through all the efforts at the business sector, business leaders, as well as to support this kind of activity, I would say gradually this situation can be changed.
Thank you. Yeah. Madam Myungja Kim, would you mind to respond to the question about if we are had to be conscious about the environment and how to save the environment? How can we teach that in schools?
Very simple question, but it is very difficult to answer. We have been trying hard to implement the environmental concept, environmental movement into the education system, especially from the early education. But I think it will depend on the countries whose socio-economic and other physical conditions are different. What I'm trying to say is that as experience has taught us, realizing the fundamental intent behind sustainable development in public policy is extremely difficult based on my experience as environment minister. To begin with, we need some sets of indicators that do justice to the different needs and requirements of countries in different stages of development with different socioeconomic and physical conditions, along with some concrete action plans based on a robust quantitative theoretical framework. However, we lack a proper understanding of the relationship between the nature and humans. So we need much of theoretical work, and we need try hard to develop some specific action plans depending on the countries, depending on the countries where the cultural backgrounds are varied.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to contribute in these last questions asking about the conscientization or education for the kids, environmental education. We can put it in two ways. Firstly, the environmental education as indigenous peoples, how we do that is from mother to the child. So the information is going naturally and traditionally through the games, through the history, because the history are oral, that you have to protect this land, you have to protect this tree, you cannot play with this bird, you cannot do that. And this education going and the kids grow up with environment protection behaviors. In formal way, like in Chad, they ask, it was in 2010 we did a study seeing why we do not have a school in my communities, they never get the school. Then we say, why? So the response from the community, they say, but they don't want to have the school where they can send the kids. They're going to learn about mathematics, France, history, and US Second War, and all those issues. They say, what's the impact in our life? Then we say, okay, what will be the challenge? Then they say they want to have the school who can learn the children about the water management, about the conflict attenuations, about the environment protections. And if the education have this one, they are ready to send the kids to school. Then the government revise the curriculum, then they are starting to putting a new curriculum for the indigenous peoples where they include environment protections, and that can be part of way of environmental education. So if the country which they can put that officially to really learn from the child to be to the secondary school, and at the traditional way also it's possible to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, also Takaya would like to add something about it.
So I am homeschooled, and it's because I was raised in an environment where our culture, in our method of education, it's more of an experiential process, and it's very personal because the person who is your teacher takes on this parental authority and responsibility that you maintain a relationship with throughout your life. It's not just kind of a figure that gets changed throughout the years, which is an aspect of school that I didn't really connect to. Also, I think that, and you brought this up a little bit, is that with the mainstream curriculum and the way of teaching, it's more about memorizing knowledge and regurgitating it and then forgetting it with no clear application to our lives. And that's why I hear from a lot of my peers, why do I have to learn about A, B, and C? It's not at all, I can't see the relevance about this information and how it connects to me. And that's because we need a sense of context. We need to bring this information back down to earth, and we need to make sure that the way of teaching isn't just putting students in a situation of constant learning with no opportunity to elevate that into application of that information and being able to teach and play with that, with those ideas of becoming the teacher and learning and teaching at the same time, because throughout your life you're going to have to constantly be doing both. So we need to be able to teach outside of the classroom. The way that we kind of instill this knowledge about the environment and how important it is we encourage different types of intelligence to bloom, not just the intellectual kind, but the kind that comes from knowing about the environment and being able to do all of these different skills that you just can't teach in the classroom. We need to expand on that.
Thank you. Okay, now let's go back to the questions. Please, from the far right, go ahead.
All right. I'm Michael Selfridge from the Federation of World Peace and Love. And I wanted to ask Myungja Kim. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. We often use traditional cultural performances to break down the barriers between people and cultures. This is our mission to spread, it's basically world peace, promote world peace. Showing that humanity has a common heart to show harmonious coexistence is possible. When you reference traditional spiritual traditions, how do you break down the barriers that are naturally created from spiritual people, like the different religions, because we find that when we get labeled as spiritual, that sometimes those are barriers that go up, and then it becomes harder to spread that more important mission, that harmonious message. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please. And specify the name of the person you would like to ask.
Hello, my name is Timothy Kim, and I'm from the Hindou Global University, and I have a question for Dr. Shihan. As an educator yourself, it's really important for the environment to have, a education system that shows the problems in the environment and how we can solve it. But some of the problems, in my opinion, in the curriculum is that we don't get to see everyday lives. In everyday lives, how we are causing the environment to go down or to be decreased in the fact that it would affect us in the future. How the education on everyday life and our lifestyle hasn't been maximized in the curriculums. What do you think needs to improve in that part with regards to climate change and the environment?
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Leicht. I'm from Association of World Citizens. We are promoting educational conscience. And my question goes to Ms. Myungja Kim. Thank you for the lecture on the impact of values on climate changes. You suggest that we transit from mass modernizations and globalizations to reasonable consummation. But reasonable may have different meanings to the rich and the poor, and the big or small countries. So because they don't have necessarily the same values, so in terms of conscience, what can we do to wake people's consciousness and to achieve a consensus? Thank you.
Okay. And the last question to the left.
Hi, my name is Cici. I'm from Federation of World Peace and Love. I don't have a question, I just have a comment. We're talking about education as being very important, and we're asking United Nations or some experts to give us suggestions for how to make the world better. But I really think the thing is really lies into each and every one of us to have conscience and have good hearts. And it's really comforting to hear that like the enterprises and businesses have been raising the awareness of providing sustainable futures. But I really think it is really the duty and responsibility of each and every one of us. So I think having a good heart and good conscience in everyone is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now I would like Dr. Shihan to respond to the first question, and then because two questions were asked to Madam Myungja Kim. So first, Dr. Shihan, please.
Yeah, I clearly see your point. We need to fundamentally change, first of all, curriculum itself, and also a lot of way of teaching. Sometimes my course, like one very interesting thing for our students is to calculate their personal carbon footprint. Not only learn the methods, but using their own, on themselves and the families. And that exercise actually, what I am always reflection is, that is something really, actually sort of change their ideas, So therefore, I would say through UNESCO and other things, talking about approach, the contents, and of course, there are also fundamental, using those sustainability competence, to guide a lot of the curriculum development. A lot of efforts. I hope another important thing is UNESCO and other national government can facilitate exchange of those interesting, effective methods, and which they can be shared by the different universities and.
Thank you. Okay, now, Madam Kim, please, because two questions were asked to you.
To the first question, when I served as Minister of Environment, my ministry created a coalition of religious organizations in Korea to promote the environmental awareness among general public. And it did quite a good job. at that time, I've got the impression that different religions have in common with regard to the relationship between the nature and humans. So that is a very good starting point. So I don't think there is any real barrier to their understanding among themselves with regard to the environmentalism. Does my answer, I don't know whether
Yeah, the other question was about how to teach the spiritual part with different religions.
So I answered based on my experience. And the other one is the gap between the poor and rich gets even bigger as in this era of technological innovation, in this era of consecutive scientific and technological innovation. In Asia, especially, the problem of gap between the poor and rich get worse year by year. In that regard, I think the concept of sustainable development, we have to face the basic concept of sustainable development. If we cannot solve the problem of equity, then there would be any hope toward the reality, the pursuing of sustainable development, because equity is one of the main concepts of the sustainable development, and it signifies a development that recognizes the necessity of an equitable use of the resources to balance the needs of the present with those of the future generations, and the needs of the global north with those of the south. We have to face this fact, and then from that point, we have to solve the equity problem among ourselves, nationwide, nationally, and globally as well.
Thanks, Ms. Kim. Okay, I will entertain 2 more questions, and then if you would like to approach the speakers, please do so after we break from this table. So please go ahead from the far right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Felicia. Oh, that's good too. Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Felicia. I'm from Leicht Millennium. So, as Mr. Alexander has mentioned, that in order for everyone to do the right thing, so the mindset has to be changed, right? Is there any specific curriculum that UNESCO has put into education to address to this core of the issues that people need to change their mind and improve the environment? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Hyuntae Kim, and from the Eco Green Organization. So, and my question is very simple. So, anyone who can answer, please answer me. The question is that, how can we make people love Mother Earth, especially who grown in the city? Yeah, this is my question. Thank you.
Okay, please.
Hi, thank you all again for coming, such a distinguished panel. And I also just wanted to take a moment to resonate with the other participants in the room. They've brought up very good points. I have a more specific question. Obviously, this conference in general has been very focused on education, and a lot of it on formal education. My question is, outside of the formal education systems, such as schools, just as global citizens, even outside of any school system, what is the best way to get people involved, and not just to care about these stories that people have, real life stories that people are engaging with their environment, but how to get them to actually do something other than like a post or share a video? What kind of storytelling can we do to inspire actual action and truly empathy?
Thank you.
And I think probably Ms. Blaney or Ms. Ibrahim, those questions are for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question.
Okay. Hi, my name is Christina. I'm from the KDI school. So actually my question is for Ms. Ibrahim or Ms. Blaney. So one of the issues right now the indigenous peoples are facing is displacement and conflict. And I think this is a really huge obstacle for them in developing their own environmental technologies, as you said. So before we can actually get to developing technologies, we'll actually have to help these people go back to their lands. But so as indigenous people, what suggestions or strategies can you suggest for this IP so that they can actually converse with their governments or with the international organizations that can help them? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, sir, please, I need to ask my question. Sorry. My name is, sorry, sir. My name is Olanrewaju Gideon from Nigeria, and I'm a member of Aid for Rural Education Access Initiative. My question is going to Mr. Alexandra. You talk about, I deduce from your speech that for learners to be able to contribute to our commitment to build a sustainable future, they need to build their competencies in three focus areas, namely education for global citizenship, climate change education, and education for sustainable consumption and production. So my question is, what is UNESCO doing to build the capacity of teachers and simplify the understanding for learners to actually develop in these core areas, most importantly in rural communities, in developing countries where online learning approaches are ineffective due to low internet penetration? Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. So Alexander, would you mind to tackle those, the first one and the last one, so be as brief as possible, please? Thank you, Alexander.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the questions. I think they were sort of related, the two questions, so I'll try to answer them in one go. Specific curricula or curricular recommendations that we put in place. I didn't have the time in my short presentation to go into that, but there's in fact a number of materials and concrete curriculum recommendations that we're making. We have a publication that brings together all the relevant topics and learning objectives for global citizenship education, and that tries to spell out the broad spectrum of objectives or of competencies that every learner should have to address global and local issues. So that's a specific publication, a specific curriculum recommendation that we have. You will also find on our website what we call the roadmap for education for sustainable development that spells out concrete actions in 5 priority areas, including curricula. And we're at the moment also, I briefly mentioned, developing a publication will be published in October, where we spell out learning objectives for each of the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is also intended as a recommendation for curriculum developers. With regard to teachers, and I'm turning to the last question, we have a number of materials as well that we try to spread through our networks. For example, the 10,000 UNESCO associated schools across the world. That is, for example, a teacher course, a teacher course package on climate change issues that we are trying to implement in countries with the help of our networks. And of course, part of our work in this area is also encouraging governments to take that work on board, because there's only so much we can do ourselves in countries in the end to have a long-term implementation of this kind of work. You need the buy-in of governments and as was referred to, the integration into the curriculum. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexander. The next one, please, Takaya, about the best ways to teach people how to act to save the environment, and not just share videos on the internet, but actually doing something.
I think that it has to do with making issues relevant and visible for people in urban areas by focusing on issues of that area. Because if you ask people whether or not they have faith in their government and whether or not their government is supporting the peoples and moving in the right direction developmentally, whether that be with establishing sustainable technologies or creating effective programs to relieve poverty. When you ask someone that, there's going to be a lot of conflicted answers of, well, I don't necessarily trust my government to be doing all of this, and I don't really feel active or that I matter in this democracy. But when you ask people the same question about their cities, and when you ask people the same question about their cities and whether or not they have faith in the democratic procedure and the ability for one person to make a difference and for movements to be effective on a municipal level, people have much more faith in the ability that they can make a difference on the level of their cities, because their relationship with being a revolutionary or participating in movements is on the basis of knowing your neighbors and knowing the people who show up to the rallies and being the person yourself that is being the target of different injustices. It's less of a direct, it's less of a feeling of being an activist, because many people exist as an activist. They go from being this passive bystander, this witness of injustice, and kind of interjecting your voice into the middle of that and protecting other groups and being a global citizen. Whereas on that kind of city level, it feels more personal. You feel less, you don't feel exactly like an activist. You don't feel like a radical, or all of those different terms that usually make people kind of hesitant from participating. You just feel like you're reacting naturally to what's happening, because you can see it all around you. So making sure that we support those movements on a level of our cities, and making sure that our cities allow themselves to be changed and allow that kind of feedback from its people, because that's the start of building a trust with our government's ability to change things. It starts in the level of cities.
Thank you so much, Takaya, for taking those two last questions. And I want to thank you, all of you, for coming here today. And I'm sorry that I had to end this roundtable. As you know, there is another one coming later on. But as you can see, dialogue is a way to solve problems. In this table, we have indigenous perspectives, we have UNESCO's perspectives, we have a private enterprise, and we have the academics, and of course, the government also represented here. So as you can see, if we can all sit and talk and express our views, we can go a long ways in actually doing something about the question of what we can do. This is one way. The other way is to actually know our neighbors, know who is sitting around, next to us, who lives in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our countries, in our planets, because that's the only way we can solve these issues of global warming. Some ideas have been brought forward to you today. If you have any more questions, please approach our guests here, but from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your patience. And please be safe when you go home and be safe in your travels. Thank you so much.